What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Resonant Arc Book Club. My name is Mike.
My name's Kason.
You guys have no idea how freaking stoked I am to start this one. We are going to be starting the Silmarillion today, which is
Yeah.
my favorite novel by 100 million light years. There is nothing in the universe that comes close in the world of literature to my love of this novel. I have so much passion for it and have been so inspired by this book over the years that I am just like shaking with excitement to like talk about it. Now, let's precurse this actually by talking about the fact that Kason and I did a book club about 10 years ago.
Yeah, probably about 10 years ago.
And literally the entire purpose of that book club was to
I think
get
there was one person.
yes, was to get my buddy Kenny McLean
Yeah.
to understand how awesome this book is,
Right.
because he was a
He
huge
he
fan
was having trouble like
getting into it.
getting it because it's really dense. It's really dense.
It's extremely
Yeah.
dense,
It's
and
not
there's
what I would call
tons
a
of names.
fun read. Unless you're like just read Dostoevsky and you are way into Lord of the Rings, then it's a really fun read. But
So yeah. Anyways, Kenny has been on podcasts in the past. Some of you guys probably
yeah.
know him, but he was a huge fan of Lord of the Rings, Final Fantasy. I met him when I was in Vegas, and we bonded over that stuff, and we played D&D together. And he and I, big nerds, and loved Tolkien, but he had never read the Silmarillion. And so he was reading it on my recommendation, was like, dude, I cannot get into this. I don't get it. Like, there's too many names. It's so dry. He was expecting probably more of like a common novel sort of prose. And this is
Yeah.
very much written like scripture.
Like scripture,
So
exactly, like canonical, yeah,
yeah.
like mythology. Yeah.
And I think there are a lot of people who pick up the book and don't really understand that that's what they're in for,
Yeah.
and have a hard time getting through the beginning. And so I created a book club, and Kaysen was a part of it. I think we invited others, but it was basically just the three of us.
Yeah.
But the entire purpose was to break down the beginning of this book in such a way that it could be more easily sort of like understood and like followed, so that when you get to the really really epic stuff in this book, like, you will get completely lost in it. So the first book club will probably be, or the first episode of this book club for this book will
Mm,
probably be about breaking down a lot of that dense material at the beginning,
yeah.
making it more easy to understand it, so that the context will be fully absorbed. And when this just crazy stuff happens later, you'll appreciate it more. So I was reading in the Discord this week a lot of people saying similar types of things. I'm
Mm,
struggling to get into this. Um, there's so many names. I feel like it's not, like, a lot of people were expressing that sentiment. And
sure.
Greg Troyan, who has been in the book club for the last few weeks since Crime and Punishment, basically, he and I have had a couple of disagreements about the prose of Crime and Punishment being what he described as brisk and an easy read. And now that a little bit of disagreement has carried over into the prose of this story.
Sure.
So I want to start there for a very specific reason, because I think a lot of people are feeling this way, and I need to. Okay, I need to preface all of this though. Sorry, I'm so excited. This is so there's so much stuff to talk about, but it requires some preface. So okay, I will first just put my bias on full display. I already have by talking about how this is my favorite book ever, and there's strong reasons for it. I'm going to detail that for you. But just know that we're talking about my favorite book ever written, right? So that's where I stand. So you understand where my bias lies. Okay. Now that being said, I think that I have lots of more objective arguments to make a case against certain sentiments that Greg brought up about why this book has lots of filler, more filler than Crime and Punishment, and I find that to be, and I love Greg. Greg knows this, so this is not like meant to be like a fight, but I find that to be just objectively wrong, and I will explain why that is. But he wanted me to mention a couple of things. First, he wrote, and this was early in the reading, Melkor is like a former guitarist of mine who just wanted to shred nonstop over my vocal parts and had no sense for song arrangement. I'm just going to view him through that context for the entire book.
Sure.
And that is a great analogy, especially for the music of the Ainur and kind of how he tried to take over it, which we'll get into later. But I thought that was
he was
I thought
more
that was
interested
funny.
in himself than in the cohesive harmony.
And just
Yeah.
blaring over the top of everything,
Yep.
right? So we'll get into that in a minute. But the other part that he started here was I was listening to our last book club meeting on the way to work and find Mike's comments about the book dragging stuff out too long somewhat ironic, given that we are now reading the Silmarillion. So he's saying that my qualms with Crime and Punishment are more apparent in the Silmarillion. Because I'm reading the Silmarillion off the heels of the Iliad and Crime and Punishment, and of those three, it is easily my least favorite. As a lore guide to the Lord of the Rings universe, it is somewhat interesting, but I never found Middle-earth to have that interesting of a mythology or landscape, the Shire being an exception. The lore was not the appeal, but rather the characters, and the Silmarillion has large chunks of text with a bunch of proper nouns thrown at you, with little context, while avoiding characterization for a while. I enjoy mythology, but ultimately most of the stories of this book drag on too long with, in my opinion, superfluous information. However, Melkor and Fëanor are great characters, and the myth of the dwarves is very cool. I'll skip a little bit here. He says, I know that lore, I know it's a lore book, and filler is the point. I'm going to say resolutely right now that there is not one word of this book that could be classified as filler. Not a single word. Every single freaking part of it is so necessary for the context of this story that, I mean, and I don't want to go too hard back on Crime and Punishment, and I'm sorry that I'm taking so long to get into this, but this is really important to me. Crime and Punishment, I said this before, to its own admission, and this is not a slight to the book, this is not a criticism of it, but to its own admission, is filled with nonsense. They say, right. "Oh, I'm talking nonsense."
Well, no one
all the
would,
time.
Yeah, no one would dispute that, because the book literally, they say it in the book.
They say it in the story
many times.
I am talking nonsense. Okay, now whether or not that nonsense or the amount of it is important to the story is worth debating. And if you wanted to make the case that it is necessary to capture the spirit of that people, of that time, and that it's all important to building the characters, I am completely on board with you there. I think that you have a perfectly sound case to make there. To say the pacing of that book is brisk is, in my opinion, the same as saying the walk of a turtle across a road is brisk, in that it is neither true but also not designed to do that on purpose. A turtle, you can't criticize a turtle for not running fast because it is not designed to do that. And Crime and Punishment is not designed to be a briskly paced story. It is meant to meander and to really delve deep into the thoughts of people and explore guilt and explore a culture of people who, like I mentioned during that entire book, like, do these people go to work? they're putting things off and talking to each other and just like doing lots of talking and dancing around subjects. It is purposefully slow, and to its credit, it needs to be for the story's sake. I just found that it could have been a little less, but that's just my opinion. I'm not saying that it should be changed or anything like that. So, that being said, The Silmarillion has zero, not one whit of filler text. And now we can begin going through this. So let's let Casey talk for a minute.
If at any point in this entire book that Tolkien writes as if quoting somebody the words or dot 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 or will you see dot dot dot. It doesn't happen. They're different writing styles.
Before we start, do you want to share your feelings about the book or anything that came to you while you're reading this time?
As opposed to the other 20 times?
Yes.
I probably haven't written it 20 times. I probably read it maybe 8 or 9 times total. But yeah, I mean, this time it's funny. I've never thought of this book as being short before, and it must be because of reading Dostoevsky right before this. But this book isn't that long. It's not that dense. It's not that difficult for me. This time around, I guess it's just like we're just going, and I'm just recalling thing after thing, and it took me like no time to get to the stopping point for this week. And it's like I love the book and I love the world. I just absolutely love getting immersed in all of this stuff. And the whole first quarter of the book is like leading up to a point where the next few weeks that we talk, there are going to be more those cohesive stories that you're looking for. But right now we're in the genesis of Tolkien's world, and it's freaking crazy. I don't have much to add other than this. I like the books that Christopher Tolkien compiled that go into more depth than the Silmarillion. So like the Children of Húrin, the Fall of Gondolin, the Beren and Luthien book that just came out, I think last year. Those like go way more in depth to those specific stories. And if you're looking for that narrative, and we should probably do that in this book club.
I would love to do that.
You got to read those books because they're so cool and they're actual, like Tolkien stories. This one, it's just totally different. You just got to take your mind out of that. I prefer those books to this one, but as a whole, this book has it all, and I freaking love it.
Yeah, I was also surprised because I remember the first time I read this book, right? There were so many names and so many names of places, and each character has like 3 or 4 different names that they're called by in names. This language or that language. And what I found so interesting is that I was so enamored by the world that Tolkien was unfolding to me after having read Lord of the Rings and getting into this, that I would constantly flip to the back of the book and look at the map,
the
context.
You kind of have to do that.
And look at the lineages and made sure I had it clear
here's the thing, though,
in my mind.
You can get, this is what screwed me up the first time I read it. I would read it. There are, I think, 3 maps that you have to reference here.
Yep.
There isn't just one. And especially as you read the beginning of the Kenta Silmarillion, you see that whatever the land looked like at first, after the first couple chapters,
totally
it's already different. It's completely different. And even what we're at now is super different from with Beleriand and Doriath. It's going to be super different from what ends up happening in the Third Age. And it's just like, it's crazy. But when I was first reading the Silmarillion and trying to figure out which map I should be referencing was actually kind of difficult for me at first. At the beginning, you figure it out. The Beleriand is the majority.
It is... I will absolutely admit, it is a book you have to work at to keep in order all of the stuff it's referencing. But they have a lot of useful tools in the book itself to do that. And if you use them as a guide while you're reading on your first attempt, and I'll go over some of that too. I have some visuals I'll be showing on.
The Encyclopedia of Arda is a super huge help too, by the way. You guys go online and just Google Encyclopedia of Arda. It has all of this information for you. If you're ever confused about names, places, dates, any of that stuff, it's all right there. Super easy to find, super quick. Encyclopedia of Arda was a huge help when I first read this book.
Yeah. And in addition, just to address, I guess, one more thing that was brought up by Greg, and again, not to discredit his opinion on this particular thing, because he said the characters are more interesting to him than the lore of Middle-earth Tolkien stuff. I would say that I find that to be... I've never heard someone say that before. I think we had talked about it in a previous podcast, how there are certain things...
Are good, but it's the world building. That's what really
there are certain things you can focus on, right? As a storyteller, you can focus on the theme and like make that like really strong, or focus on your character development as like a character study of like human behavior and you know like the way that we are, or you could make your plot be really full of interesting ideas, and you can have a combination of things, but usually it's like one thing is done really well.
He does everything well. It's just he does one thing way better.
But the world building is the mythos, entire crux.
The map, all of it, man.
The entire crux of what makes these stories work, because they feel real, they feel lived in, and this mythology of anything I've ever read is the closest to mirroring the level of complexity and depth that we have in real world mythologies created by the Norsemen or the Greek gods or Christianity or anything else.
Egypt, stuff that Tolkien studied, honestly, his whole life.
Yeah. And
he was a linguist, but
this mythology has an equal, if not even in some ways, in my opinion, a deeper level of depth and complexity to sort of explain the origins of this world and how it came to be, and the peoples and cultures and their languages. And it is so well thought through. It's just, I mean, because the man spent his entire lifetime working on this. I was watching a video. It was Christopher Tolkien talking about his father's work and how many versions of the Silmarillion there were, and how The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, well, by the time The Lord of the Rings came around, I think he had been trying to tie it into his Silmarillion, but The Hobbit was not originally written as part of this mythos at all. Right. It was just a story he told to his children when they were young.
Yeah, Bilbo Baggins. It may have been like loosely fit in just with, because all this stuff was floating around his head, but it wasn't like part of it at all.
Well, even like place names, the Misty Mountains, and a lot of this stuff was not meant to be part of part of the Silmarillion mythology, but he sort of worked it all in eventually, because that was this was the heart of his life's work. It was not the other stuff.
He died, and it was never released until after he died.
And his son compiled his notes and tried to sort of form it into a single volume.
Which is the craziest thing. He worked on this book for like 60 years. And it was since like before World War I, basically. And he never got around to actually being able to say, I'm done.
Yeah.
There's a lesson to be learned in there somewhere. But
yeah. But anyways, so I've read the book, I want to say this is probably my 6th or 7th time reading it. And it is amazing to me how every single time I pick up on something I didn't pick up on before. And I think that one of the strongest themes that I've seen on this time is the idea of the most skilled, the most powerful, the smartest, and like those with the most potential having the greatest danger of pride completely blinding them and leading them down a path of vengeance and darkness and an inability to admit wrong.
You see that multiple times, yeah.
And it is encapsulated first in Melkor, and then we see it in the Knoll Door, who are the most in skill and in temperament like Melkor is.
There's something I know, we'll get around to this, but there's something specifically I noticed about the Knoll Door and their vows and stuff that stuck out to me this time that I never really thought of before. But let's start with
at the beginning.
Ainulindale and Valakenta.
The song of the Ainur. Or the music of the Ainur, right? Okay, so there's lots of names here. Let's start with the most important ones. Eru Iluvatar.
Eru, yeah.
Who is number one god, the most powerful being of all the cosmos. He is the god of this mythology, right? And the Ainur are the people of Eru Iluvatar, the spirits that dwell with him, that are the children of his thought, as it's called, right?
Right.
So each of them kind of are born of like a specific, I don't know what to call it, like temperament or feature of his mind.
Sure.
And understand that part from which they were born. but they kind of have to work together as a group to like fully converge into like understanding the full mind
Yeah.
of Iluvatar. So they'll say things like Melkor and Manwë were brothers in the thought of Iluvatar, right? So, anyways, you have kind of two different subdivisions of the Ainur. The Valar, which are the most powerful, and then the Maiar, which are of the same race, you could call it, but are just lesser in ability, might, power, that sort of thing, right? So, anyways, there are obviously countless spirits that are of the Ainur, but they dwell with Iluvatar in the cosmos. And this book is chiefly concerned with like the most powerful of these, which are like the Valar that eventually come down into the world, create it, and sort of like manage it. More than rule it, they manage it, right?
Sure, yeah.
So let's pull up. I've got nope, not that one. This
While you're doing that, Swan Knight 14 says Valar are based on the Vanir, the other race of Norse mythology, which has Freyr, Freya, and Njord. Interesting. The Vanir.
Okay, I need to put this over here. Okay, I'm all messed up. Hold on. I'm gonna pull this to this side. Here we go. So I have this visual aid here. Maybe I should have sent this to you, Case. I didn't think to do that, so you don't know what I'm looking at. Anyway, so we have the Valar, the powers of the world, the Ainur who chose to enter Ea, which is the Aerator, the High Ones of Arda, numbered in order of power. So these are the Valar who are of chief concern to the story we're going to be talking about. They're the ones who actually come into the world. Now, it's really nice in this little graphic that they've bolded the ones that are the most powerful, and then the ones that are not are unbolded, right? So we have Melkor, who is the most powerful Valar. The most skilled. Like I was saying earlier, you know, the theme of this book kind of is concerned with those who have the most potential, the most skill, the most, power, and how that leads very easily into the kind of pride that is the downfall. And I mean, you see that all the time in real life. I mean, the most arrogant people, the most self-absorbed people are generally the ones who are the most talented, the ones who feel they have a right to be that way, right?
Sure.
So Melkor is the most powerful one. Manwë is his brother, who is, I mean, not like necessarily greatly weaker than Melkor, but certainly not of the same stature. But, you know, they are two of the most, what's the word I should use for it? Exalted among the Valar. And in the beginning, I'll kind of come back to our thing here. They had a great music was sort of like, what do you call it? Iluvatar gathered all of the Ainur together and said, "We're gonna do this. We're gonna play this music that I've come up with, and each of you will have your part that I've given to you specifically. You're all born from like a different part of my mind, so each of you will have a part, and in harmony together, we'll sort of like perform this music." So he sits and he begins listening to the music that the Valar are playing, and each of them only kind of comprehends or understands the part that they're given. But Melkor continually sort of tries to rise up and dominate it and lead it in his own direction. And the reason for this is that he was impatient. And this is one the first example that we'll be talking about today of a piece of context that is given here that makes something that happens in the Lord of the Rings stories make a lot more sense. It's all of a sudden it's like, oh, that's what they were talking about. That's what they were referencing. Melkor was envious of what's called the Flame Imperishable, or the secret fire.
Yeah.
He wanted to find it. And what is the secret fire or the flame imperishable? Because eventually it says he searched in vain through the cosmos to find this, because it is actually found in Iluvatar himself.
The flame imperishable is essentially what gives free will to other
Yes.
things, right?
Life and free will.
Yeah.
Is
Melkor,
where that's born.
everything Melkor does after this is like a, what would you call it? It's like a fake version of, life or free will, or just a distorted version, because he's seeking for that flame imperishable.
Right. So the only being who has the power to actually give life, consciousness, and free will to another being is Iluvatar. Now, Iluvatar gave that to all the Valar, all the Maiar, and all of the elves and men and everything else that would come afterward. He's the only one who has the power to give that. Melkor was envious of this. He wanted to create things that were of his own design, that were other than himself.
Mm.
And that in and of itself is not necessarily an evil aim. And this is what's so great, and where the nuance of the story really comes into place, is that it doesn't start out that Melkor was evil. He was incredibly glorious being, and had so much potential for good, and I think set out originally for something that is not necessarily evil. He just wants to create. He wants to do something.
There's
with
a big
these powers that he has.
biblical parallel here.
Sure. And I mean, it's obvious that the story of Lucifer is what this is,
Yeah,
inspired by, right?
exactly.
The fallen angel Lucifer, who wanted to glorify himself to be
yeah.
above God, right?
Mm.
So, anyways, he can't find the flame imperishable. But he has this drive inside of him to rule, to lead, to be the master of others. Now, whether or not that is initially for an evil purpose or not, I don't think that it is. But it becomes that way. It becomes that way because it is denied of him. No, you cannot have this. And when they begin the music, he is unaware of the purpose of the music. No one really understands it. They think they're just doing music, right?
Mm.
But Melkor tries to rise and dominate it because he wants to lead. He wants to be in charge. He wants to do something of his own will and not of the will of Iluvatar. But his music is abrasive. It is loud and boisterous, but not harmonious. And it creates discord, and everyone's getting confused, and they don't know how to follow their parts because the music of Melkor is just blaring, and some kind of go to his side and try to kind of harmonize with what he's doing, and the whole thing becomes a total mess.
Yeah.
And Iluvatar stands up and says, "Stop, let's start again." He weaves a new theme that's harmonious and peaceful and beautiful. And then Melkor tries to dominate it again, and then the whole thing just blares into this tempest that is so turbulent and so scary that a lot of the Ainur are just like, I can't even play anymore. I don't even know what to do. This is freaking me out. Like, what the frick is going on? Iluvatar has to stand again and say, enough, and begins the third theme, which sort of ends the music. Now, what he ends up revealing is that, first of all, this is the history of a world that they're going to be creating. This music is like a chronicle or a foreshadowing of the history of this world that is about to be created. It's such a cool, the mythology of the real world is so clever in the stories that people created to explain why the sun rises and falls.
Sure. Or the constellations, or all that.
Right. Like, they came up with these incredibly clever stories, and that's why mythology is so interesting, because of the creativity behind it, to explain the world in a world where they didn't have the technology or the scientific method to sort of figure out and observe why things are happening. But the stories that they invented were so amazing and fascinating.
Right.
And this, to me, is such a cool setup for the idea of fate that is unchangeable, right? Essentially like preordination. This tale of this music that was woven before the creation of the world basically chronicling exactly what's going to happen, and that is like the foundation for fate in this world. I think is just a really clever
Yeah.
way to set a foundation for how fate operates in the world, right? So he reveals that, and at first they had only heard the music, so they didn't like have a concept of what this would look like. And he shows them a vision, and it passes quickly, and they struggle to, again, each of them is only like a part of Iluvatar's mind, so they can't understand the totality of it.
Yeah.
But they're just awed by this vision that he shows them of what's going to come to pass. And he says to Melkor, now you see that your attempts to try and take over, your attempts to try and dominate, your attempts to try and like take from me the control of this music is all a part of it. And in the end will work towards its beauty and its fulfillment. So you're only a part of the cog of my plan. And what could be a worse thing for someone as proud and as desirous to lead and as well, just strictly arrogant and prideful,
Yeah.
and to hear than that? You cannot dominate. You will not have control. You're just a part of my creation. And this is humiliating to him. And we see the first seed of what to me is like the point of no return. And I think that this is a cautionary tale in a lot of ways. You see it in scripture a lot, especially in the Bible and in Christian scripture. This cycle of pride, right?
Yeah.
Where people, when they fall into humility, they are blessed and they're given riches, and the people grow, and they expand, and their minds are enlightened, and then they start to think that that they start to believe that it's within them, that they created this abundance, that they are hot shiz, so to speak, I guess, a clumsy way of saying it. But they start to forget like who gave them the gifts in the first place. And it's at that point that there's sort of a point of no return that happens. And here, Melkor is put in his place. But instead of accepting it, instead of saying, okay, like I will accept my part, or that, I seek to aid or help or be a part of this great thing, and play a part along with all the others in this great thing that we can create, and we can all share in it together. He instead blackens his heart and says, no, like I'm better than them. I should rule. I should be in charge. This belief that you are better than others, that arises from the fact that in some ways that's not untrue. I mean, he is more skilled. He is.
Right. He was given a greater portion, it seems.
Yeah. But when you let that go to your head, it's not even so much that you just become arrogant, but that you will seek to try and prove your dominance. That it becomes more important to you to show that you are greater than others than it is to cohabitate and enjoy and share things together and take joy in what others can do too, right? You start to see yourself as the only important part. And so that's when his sort of like turn begins. And it says at first that he didn't really it says I let me see if I can pull it up, because I took like 70 screenshots of different pages that I'm not going to be able to go through.
Nope.
Them all. And so I'm trying to just remember it the best I can, but I think it said something like that he even deceived himself at first, or convinced himself at first, that he wanted to help, that he wanted to achieve the vision that was shown, and that he went down there without any malice in his heart, but just slowly over time. I mean, this is eons and eons of time that they are in this creation cycle period, right? Just over time, he just sort of can't let go of this need to be in charge, to rule, to be the number one guy, for everyone to praise him, for him to be the one. that achieves all of this, right? And so, anyways, what ends up happening is that there's a sundering between them, and Melkor converts a lot of the lesser Ainur, the Maiar spirits, to kind of his side. And then you have the Valar, who are sort of all kind of doing their best to create, according to the music and according to the vision that they saw, the world that Iluvatar had dictated. But every time they form a mountain, Melkor comes and throws it down. And every time they delve a valley, he spills it and like or raises it up. And anytime they create a lake, he spills it. And he's just like constantly. And this is also stop, Creative Cloud. I don't give a fetch. Go away. Stop. Interrupt. What is happening? 18 updates. Okay. So this is something that I find really profound about it as well, is that when a person gets to that point, right, where their motivation is driven by jealousy, by greed, often that makes a person lose the potential of the gifts they could have had or that they could have borne, right? So instead of being able to create, which is something he always wanted from the start, all he can really do is pervert.
Yeah,
he can destroy things other people are making, or when he tries to create something, he really just taking something beautiful that was brought about through the dictation of the music, and he sort of just changes it or copies it really crudely and darkens it and perverts it. And so he goes from being this light, amazing Valar with huge potential to someone who can really only just crudely copy and try to mar or destroy what's being made.
Right.
And this is a process that happens over, I mean, eons and eons and eons. But what is so cool about it is that, as the music predicted, as often as he would throw down or try to destroy what they made, the world was basically created in its final form due to the fact that they tried to do one thing, but then he messed it up. So they kind of had to like pick up the pieces, and like slowly over time, they still formed the world the way it was supposed to be.
Yeah.
And so everything still comes about as it was dictated in the music. So fate is not changeable. It will happen as it was dictated in the music, no matter what. But the thought of, I mean, I tried to imagine as I was thinking about this, like, what if like I was creating a video or something, and like some elf man came in the night and would like change up my timeline or like delete certain like files out of there, and just kind of like messed it up, and I would show up the next day, it's like my entire timeline for the video is completely screwed up and I have to start over again. I guess an equivalent to that would be, there was one time where my hard drive failed, my internal hard drive failed right in the middle of a project, and I had to basically start it over again. And I did not remake what I had originally done the first time. It was invariably different than the first project I had worked on, but yet it was still something that I was proud of, something I was happy with. But like the original thing I was doing was lost forever. And that's something that they bring up a lot in the story, where they say, I've made this thing, I put my entire heart and soul into it, but I can't make this thing again. This is the only time that such a thing can be made, and I've put all my energy and all my thought into it, and my weariness now, after having put that much effort into something, I can't make that thing again.
Right.
And we'll touch on that in a second. But before I continue, because I'm talking forever, anything from the chat or anything that you have in response? Interesting anecdotes or anything like that?
There's a couple. Swan Knight keeps talking about, just keeps adding on to things that you're saying as we go. But one of his recent ones says that's what the film Mother talks about, in my opinion. But I haven't actually seen Mother before. Is that
I haven't either.
Guillermo del Toro one by chance, or no? Is that Mama?
No. I think Mama is. I think Mother is. What's his name? The guy who did Black Swan.
Oh, Darren Aronofsky.
I think it's Darren Aronofsky. Yeah.
No, I don't think I've seen it. So anyway,
I think it's pretty much a parallel of like the biblical creed. that movie is like an analogy for.
That sounds like Aronofsky. Yeah, nothing crazy. I mean, people are just kind of offering their 2 cents as we go, just little by little. The one I found the most
Okay.
interesting was the Nordic, the stuff that Swan Knight 14 talks about with the Nordic Norse mythology being the Ainur or the Maiar and the Valar based on the Aesir and the Vanir. So I thought that was super cool. Um, but yeah.
So what C.T. Blanco is getting into here, I really like how he described the creation of dwarves. Let's get into that first by looking back at this visual again of all the different Valar, because we need to sort of tie who is who here, right?
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of names.
Yeah.
So there are 8 principal Valar, the most powerful. There were originally 9. Melkor was named among them, but after they denied him the lordship of the world, and he became their enemy, that he was no longer counted among them. So there are 9 names here that are bolded. We have Namo, who is Mandos, Olmo, Nienna, Melkor, Manwë, Varda, Yavana, Aule, and Orame. Those are the most powerful Valar. And of course, Melkor was chief among them, but was no longer counted among them. So let's try and put some characteristics to these. I think the 3 that he goes over first in the novel are Manwë, Olmo, and Aule. Those are the 3 that he first tries to describe. And the easiest way to remember this is that Manwë is like Lord of the Air, essentially, Lord of the Winds. And he is essentially made the king of the Valar. He is the one who most closely understands the mind of Iluvatar, of all of them. And so he kind of answers directly to Iluvatar in sort of like the place of all the Valar. So he's made like the king. And he's like the lord, again, of like the winds. Then you have Olmo. And they actually have here, next to them, little numbers, which is also nice. So Manwë, number 1, next to him, right? Olmo, number 2. He is the lord of the sea. He's basically Poseidon in this world. He is also, he never got married. So he doesn't have like a partner. He's alone. And he doesn't really go and interact with the Valar very much. He's kind of a loner, likes to keep to himself. He's the lord of the sea. So the water god. Number 3, you have Aule, who is like Lord of Earth, I guess you could put it that way, right? But chiefly, he's actually closest in powers and temperament to Melkor. He's actually like a good version of Melkor, basically. A Melkor who never allowed his pride to overcome him. He kept his humility, and he delighted in creating things, building things with his hands, working with metals, and making beautiful things. But he always was moving on to the next project. He didn't hoard them jealously. The things he created, he shared openly with everyone, and he didn't ever say, "Oh, that's mine," and like, "I made this, and look how great I am." He didn't have that part of Melkor's temperament. But he had a similar skill set, so to speak. So anything in terms of like the creation of jewels and metalwork and like just rock and the earth itself, that's Aule's domain, so to speak. Then we have Orome, who is like the lord of forests and hunting. He's a hunter. Who's the Greek god who's the hunter? I forget his name.
Well, Swan Knight 14 says Orome is similar to male Artemis.
Artemis. Yeah. So he goes forth and he's a friend of beasts and that sort of thing. And he spends his time in the forests and he slays all the monsters of Melkor. So he has like wolves, like wolf packs that follow him, and he rides on a mighty horse, a white horse, and he goes and he fights against all the monsters that Melkor creates, the Balrogs and other servants of Melkor. By the way, the Balrogs are Maiar, for those of you who are interested. They were part of the people of the Ainur, in the original music, and he corrupted them, along with Sauron. Sauron was it was a Maiar as well, who he corrupted
Yeah,
to
somebody
to
here
his
mentioned
service.
his name was Tar Myron. Tar Myron was Sauron's name originally.
Yes, correct. So, anyways, that's Aule or Orome. Sorry. Um, then we have Mandos over here, who is essentially like the Lord of the Dead, like master of spirits and the keeper of the houses of the dead. And he's super cool. I like him a lot because he's the one who like memorized the music.
Mm.
So nobody else really like knows every part of the music. They didn't like keep it in mind. So they kind of have to work together to sort of like, you know, but Mandos, like his chief like purpose was to he tried to like keep it all in mind. So he's like the doom master. So when he speaks of doom, he's essentially telling you the fate of what's going to happen. He knows everything that's going to happen, except for the very, very end. The end of the world, he does not know that. That's kind of left in the mind of Iluvatar. Only Iluvatar knows that. But everything else that's going to happen, Mandos knows that. Okay. So those are the... Well, actually, I forgot about the three ladies. So we have Varda, who is the spouse of Manwë, and she's the Lady of the Stars, and is the most revered of all the Valar with the elves. Because when the elves awoke, the first thing they saw was the stars. This was before there was a light, like a light for the world. And as we'll get into later, they were born in a separate area of the world from where the Valar were. And so they were born in darkness, and the lights that they saw were the stars. So they always praised her above all the other Valar.
They had a different, well, at least in the Elvish language, they would call her Elbereth.
Yes.
Which was, you hear that in Lord of the Rings a few times. But Elbereth was, the most revered god for the elves.
Yep. So Manwë and Varda are married, or they are spouses, partners. Aule's partner is Yavana, who is queen of the earth. It goes really well with Aule, because Aule is kind of the master smith, lord of the earth kind of thing. And she is the queen of things that grow, trees and plants and fruits. And so like them two being paired together is, it makes a lot of sense. But also at the same time, they're kind of at odds because he takes things like wood and things that grow from the earth, and he creates things with them. And there's a cool story behind that we'll get into here in a minute. And then we have Nienna, who is sister of the Fianturi, basically the sister of Mandos and Irmo of Lorien. Again, a sister in the thought of Iluvatar. But anyways, these are the names. And I think the most important ones to keep in mind for the story are Manwë, Olmo, and Aule. And then, of course, Varda being like the spouse of Manwë, Yavana being the spouse of Aule. And then Mandos and Tolkas, who we've not really talked much about yet. Tolkas is awesome.
He's a wrestler.
Yeah, I guess you could call him the god of war, but
yeah,
he doesn't have the temperament of what would typically be considered the god of war. He's not a violent or malicious person.
He doesn't fight to dominate. He fights
for the fun of it.
Own strength. Like he thinks it's fun to like have a challenge, but he's not like trying to dominate people,
Yeah, it was funny. The way they described it in the book was that he laughed in violence and like everywhere else. He's constantly just like laughing and having a good time. He's just a lighthearted, good dude who likes to have fun. But he's strong. He is like a wrestler, a fighter. But unlike Orome, who had more of a darker temperament to him, and not dark in the sense that evil, just he was more serious. And he could get real angry. And Tolkas never got angry, even when he was fighting. He was always having a good time.
Yeah, that's right.
But he also isn't like the wisest. So that's like kind of his weakness, is he's super strong and can fight better than anyone, even better than Melkor. but he's not great in council. Like when they draw the council, Tulkas doesn't really have much to add in terms of like wisdom to what people are talking about. So those are the Valar. Now, a couple of things that I skipped that I want to kind of go back on, getting back to like the secret fire. You guys remember when Gandalf stands on the bridge of Khazad-dûm in Lord of the Rings, and he's speaking with the Balrog and telling him, "You shall not pass." That whole scene, which is like the best freaking scene in the entire freaking trilogy of movies.
Yeah.
He says, "I am the servant of the secret fire, wielder of the flame of Arnor." Arnor, right? So he is the servant of the secret fire. You can interpret that two different ways. I am the servant of Ilúvatar, which is Ilúvatar was the one who had the secret fire within him. But it also says that when the beginning of the world happened, Ilúvatar sent out the secret fire, or the flame imperishable, into the center of this world. And so all the life that springs from the world is because the heart of the planet itself has the flame imperishable in it. So you could also interpret that as, I am the servant of this world, of the life of this planet. Right? And that's what he's referring to there. And when I was reading this for the first time, because again, that's my favorite scene in the books or in the movies, it's like, oh, that's the secret fire. That's what that is. That's what he's talking about. And so that's the first example of how those stories are deepened tremendously by the context offered in the Silmarillion. You're going to learn about things like that when you go back and you watch those movies, or when you read those books again, it's like, holy crap, that's that. And oh my gosh, that's what they're talking about. That's what they're referencing. And all of a sudden, and this is the joy that I found in rereading The Lord of the Rings, is that the first time you read it, you are following the story from the perspective of hobbits who know nothing about this.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Totally ignorant of anything outside of the little shire that they're in. They have no idea what's going on. And those that do study it a little bit, like Frodo and Bilbo, are kind of seen as weirdos and are outcasted a little bit. It's like, hey, man, like, what are you studying all that elven stuff for? But so when you read it, it's like, it's a grand epic story, but you don't really understand how much danger they were actually in. You don't really realize what kind of power they were dealing with. And that's why, like, when they're being chased by the ring wraiths, and it's like, ooh, this is scary because they're scary, imposing dudes, but you have no idea just how bad that situation really was. And so then when you come back through on the second reading, you get the perspective of a Galadriel, of Gandalf.
Oh, Galadriel is huge. But Colin Peluso mentioned something. He says it would have been nice in the Fellowship of the Ring if Gandalf mentioned that the Balrog was almost on the same level as Sauron, right? I read that, and in light of what you just said about the ring wraiths, about the whole world, and how you just don't know this kind of stuff. Gandalf knew that. He wasn't going to tell anybody that, because the stuff that the hobbits were up against was so beyond them. But the appreciation after reading the Silmarillion of the books, Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit and everything else, it kind of underscores why the Silmarillion is an important piece of work, because it does help you to frame those books a little bit differently. So while Colin thinks it would have been nice if Gandalf mentioned that, I think, well, hey, it's actually really mysterious what the Balrogs are and where they came from. And I think it's fine that he doesn't bring up that Gandalf isn't telling them, like, oh, this thing's like Sauron,
or is as powerful as, or more. Well, he does at least mention that this foe is beyond any of you. Right? Exactly.
But that's so mysterious.
Like, possibly beyond myself.
He doesn't need to, like, compare it to anything, right? This is so crazy. And I really like how Tolkien does that in his writings. And then if you really want to know how crazy it is, how above all of them was the Balrog, read the Silmarillion and you'll find out. It's pretty freaking crazy.
Yeah. That Balrog there is actually not even close to, like, one of the more powerful ones. Either.
Like the big ones that used to command the...
It was a lesser Balrog.
The dragon Smaug was freaking nothing compared to the dragons that came before him.
Holy fetch. We'll get into that later. There is a dragon in this book That is so freaking huge.
Probably massive, but
Anyways,
part of why
getting ahead of,
the whole map gets screwed up, you know.
yeah, we'll get into that in a minute. Also, I want to apologize to Rob real quick. I just saw him here. I forgot that we had daylight savings this week, and so
Oh,
when we announce
ah,
6 o'clock, that would have been different. So I apologize for that. My bad. I didn't even think of it. I forgot that
I didn't either.
in this country we have the most retarded time system
Americans do
ever.
weird things like this. We all change our time every 6 months. I don't know.
So, anyways, let's get back into. Okay, so they go on for a long time, and essentially where they are building this kingdom is in what will eventually become Middle Earth. That's kind of where they start. That's where the Valar's kingdom is. And Melkor sneaks in with his servants, and they destroy stuff and they make problems. But anyways, they sort of kind of get to a point where they're finished, and they're like, "Yay, we've created this place." And the first lights that they made were these huge towers with big lamps inside of them. So they had, I think it was it two or three? I can't remember. Anyways, they raised these giant towers, and they had these lamps burning in them that sort of like cast light in the realm, right? So this is before any of the children of Iluvatar appear. I forgot to say that. So the entire purpose of creating this world, Iluvatar says, "I'm going to have my children will come into the world. At what time you don't know, but there will be the firstborn and then the followers. The elves and then men will be second, and each of them will have a separate fate or a separate doom. The elves will essentially be immortal in the sense that they will never die of natural causes. They can still be slain, but their spirits will remain in Middle Earth even when they're slain. Whereas men live a short space and their fate is unknown. It is totally mysterious. Nobody, not even the Valar, not even Mandos, knows what the fate of men is. And Melkor is jealous of that too. So he actually fears men more than he does the elves, and why he works so hard to corrupt them.
You know, kind of funny. There's some weird genius to that. That like it is part of the fate of men to not know where they're going to end up. Like that's part of their fate.
Yeah,
Elves,
exactly.
the end game. They know where they're going. They know what they're striving towards. They know, like, you know, with the Halls of Mandos and Valinor and all this kind of stuff, especially those in Middle Earth, like they just kind of get it. The humans are just like, we have no idea what is in store for us, and it's part of their fate. It's very interesting.
Really cool. So, anyways, they're kind of waiting now for the time where the firstborn will arrive. So they've created this place, but in a time of festival, this is a theme. At a time of festival, when the Valar are getting together to have a good time and celebrate, Melkor comes in, throws down the lamps, the towers that had the lamps, darkens the earth, and kind of takes off, like, and just like runs away.
He does this a lot.
And Tulkas can't find him. Orome goes after him. He escapes again, and they're pissed. They're like, "We are freaking sick of Melkor coming through and screwing up everything that we make. Let's leave this land to him and go into the west, into the land of Aman, and create our, like, kind of hole ourselves up there, like establish our kingdom there instead." And so they go into a land far in the west called Aman, and they start building that's where they really get to work, and where some of the most incredible feats of the Valar are accomplished. Chiefly is Yavana, who, like we said, is like the goddess of trees and things that grow. And she creates these two trees, Telperion and, is it Lorien? I always forget the name of the second one.
Oh, darn.
Dang it, I can't remember. Anyways, two trees. And she essentially sets them up on like a...
And Laurelin.
Laurelin, that's what it is, yes. Telperion and Laurelin.
The silver and gold.
Yep, silver and gold trees, and they cast light in and of themselves. So they have an inner glow within them, and they light the world of Aman, or the kingdom of Aman. And they have sort of a timing to them, right? As one waxes, the other wanes, and then vice versa. They kind of go back and forth, and the gold will be bright, and the silver will die down, and then, they'll kind of just like oscillate back and forth. And those two trees light the kingdom of Aman, where the Valar is set up. This is very important. It's like the most beautiful freaking thing ever created in this world. These trees and the light of these trees is so blessed, and everything that falls within them is just like filled with this glory. There's an aura, almost a light that shines in the eyes and in the faces of those who have seen those trees that is visible, and it just gives this gift, this blessed gift to those who can see it. It is like literally the most beautiful thing created in the entire world, and Yavana accomplished that.
That is a really important thing to note, because these trees did not light Middle Earth. So as much as they were lights for the land, it was just for where the Valar were, or the Valar were. It wasn't for Middle Earth. So specifically when the elves wake up, that's why they just see all the stars. And that's their light, as far as but in Middle Earth, they don't really have the light of the trees.
Okay, so two things. First of all, Colin Peluso asks, where do the spirits of the elves reside? Are they encountered? And Swan Knight answered right above that, actually. The spirits of the elves go to the palaces of Mandos to be renewed. Then they reincarnate after a long time, and they're kept in Valinor. So we'll get into a minute a little bit more about the elves, but Mandos, like we said, he's like the Doom Master, the Lord of Spirits. And so he has halls that are kind of the equivalent of the afterlife for elves. When they die, they go to the halls of Mandos, and their spirits are healed of all the terrible traumatic things they suffered through their freaking thousands of years of life. And then eventually they can be reborn again in Valinor. But we'll get to that in a minute. So like Kaysen said, these trees did not light Middle Earth. They only lit Aman. And eventually there were a few of the Valar who were really concerned about Middle Earth. They didn't really like that they left it behind. Orome the Hunter was one of these, and he frequently went back because he likes hunting the beasts of Melkor, right? He likes to kill monsters and stuff. So he would go back with some of his servants, the Maiar servants that he had, and they would frequently return there. Yavana also was concerned about the trees and the life that existed in Middle Earth. And so she had this yearning for Middle Earth. And so there were some Valar who really were keeping watch of Middle Earth to await the coming, because they didn't know where or when the firstborn would come.
Yeah.
Now, right before that happens, right before the birth of the firstborn, Aule becomes a bit impatient himself. Aule, again, the Lord of Smiths, kind of god of the earth kind of a thing. And he goes and he creates 7 beings. So these are the fathers of the dwarves. But the difference is that he doesn't have the secret fire. So he can't give them life and free will. So he's sort of the puppet master, and they'll act and do whatever he consciously thinks for them to do. And Iluvatar is aware that this has happened, and he comes down and says, like, what are you doing? Why you don't have the power to create beings of free will other than yourself? I have not given you that gift. What are you trying to do? And Aule responds in a way that I just found really, really charming or endearing to him. He says, like, the fact that I try to mimic the work of my father is not a mockery. It's that I yearn to be more like you, to do great works like you can do. And, that's all I wanted, was just to... And it's not dissimilar to the original intent of Melkor. It really isn't.
Right. The difference is the humility.
Yes.
The reverence to a greater power as opposed to himself. Yeah.
So when he's confronted by Iluvatar, instead of blackening his heart to that and doubling down and saying, no, I will become greater than you or equal to you, he says, all right, I'll take up my hammer and I'll destroy these things that I've made, right? But understand, I never meant to be the word I'm thinking. Oh, my brain's not working. So many things. Anyways, he never meant to mock or be what is the word when you're rude to somebody? You're
to be rude.
No,
to be
disrespectful. Holy crap! I could not think of the word disrespectful. He did not do it in disrespect to Iluvatar, and Iluvatar sees that, and wants to actually reward his, the goodness in his heart. And so Iluvatar gives the secret flame to the dwarves. And as Aule is raising his hammer, to come down on them and to destroy them, they shrink and say no. And Iluvatar says, "Wait. You see, like if you had been controlling them, they wouldn't have shrunk from your will. They would have just
They'd have accepted.
allowed you to do it because that's what your will is. But see, now they have a will of their own. I have given that to them. But they must not come before my children, the elves, the firstborn, right? So we're going to put them in hibernation deep in the earth. And when they awake, they will be people of the deeps, of caves and of mountains. And you start to see the hardiness, the temperament of that people being so like to Aule himself, but also to the circumstances of which they were born deep in the earth and learning how to mine and create from the rock and the metal deep in the earth. And so we have a sort of a prelude, sort of a foreshadowing to who the dwarves would eventually become. Really cool little story. Mike needs language memory rehabilitation. Kingdom Hearts broke his brain. That was true.
Chocolate Rob says, does that healing, the healing of the halls of Mandos, does it also cover elves corrupted into orcs?
Oh man, that is never covered, and I that is one thing I wish was.
I have a thought that the original elves that were taken and corrupted, that would still apply to them. But the way that orcs were bred and created, it is not necessarily the natural process by which elves are born. And so I would say the additional, or what became the orcs later on, which were not, I don't know, the later orcs, no. But the initial elves who were captured and tortured and corrupted, I would say probably yes. But I don't really have anything behind that. It's just that's just my own speculation, because he doesn't really cover it. So
your head.
That's an interesting thought, though.
So Rob says, "I'll smush these proto dwarfs for you, Father." Does not sound charming to me. And yeah, that's not what I'm saying is charming.
Abraham and Isaac, with God telling Abraham to kill his son, and in anyways, the whole point of the whole story in the Bible sort of corresponds to this one a little bit, where God's like, "Oh no, don't actually kill him, but hey, I had a point to this whole thing," kind of thing.
And that's not the part that was charming to me at all. The part that's charming to me
was that the kid is like, "I'm trying to be like you, Dad."
Yeah, like just the yearning to create, to do something amazing, like someone that you respect. I see it the same as when I was a kid and I would go and watch my dad play basketball in the leagues that he played in, the city leagues and stuff like that. And I would, on the sideline, try to mimic the moves, the ball handling. I tried to emulate my father. And this yearning to create something as great as those as who you respect,
right,
is, I think, a really relatable feeling and a sentiment that to me is very charming. A child who wants to emulate and become something great and has aspirations for something great. Right. And that desire, that innocent desire, being rewarded by the father, even though he had tried to do something sort of out of turn, he was not doing it for the wrong reasons, as Melkor had tried to do. So that's the part of it that I find charming and endearing. Okay, so then the dwarves are placed deep in the earth, and their lore is pretty different because, like, well, what's the fate of the dwarves then, right? Like, we know that the fate of men, they have another fate out of the world that is unknown, but that Iluvatar has dictated, and a lot of the Valar have no idea what it is, and Melkor fears that. The elves' fate is to remain in the world until the end. But what of the dwarves' fate? Now they have kind of their own lore, but which is more or less the one that I think we can accept, is that they, like the elves, kind of remain in the earth, and they talk about how the seven fathers of the dwarves reincarnate, over time and stuff like that, but that eventually they will be given a place in the final music of Iluvatar after the world, and that they will be accepted as his children as well. But that their place will come after the fate of the other two has been. Okay, now we have the awakening of the elves in Middle Earth. So in the grasp of Melkor, in the grasp of his kingdom of darkness, the elves awake. And like we said, the first thing they see, the stars, and Elbereth, who is Varda, is the queen that they are the most endeared to because that was the first thing that they saw when they.
Yeah.
Now in this realm, Melkor found them first,
Of course.
and any of them that wandered away, in small numbers, he captured, tortured them, slew them, and this is where basically the orcs, the race of the orcs, comes into being. This was described in the book, I think, as the one of the most evil of all the works of Melkor, was that he took these elves and perverted them into orcs, like created this dark, hideous, hateful race. But again, he can't create it in his own, like of his own. He has to take something beautiful and always just destroy, pervert.
Yeah.
And so that's where the orcs come from. So the only Valar, essentially, that they knew of, and they didn't really have names for all this stuff yet, was that they knew that there were these monsters and these hunters of Melkor that would come and waylay them and torture them and kill them and capture them. And so when Orome finds them for the first time, they're afraid of him because they see him as this powerful hunter that is in temperament not totally dissimilar. He was this hardened sort of serious, angry hunter who slew the beasts of Melkor. And so when he comes out, it's like, oh, they're all afraid of him, right? So let me pull up another visual aid here. Okay. Because this is where we start getting into, this was for the first time when I was reading it, where I was like, holy crap, this is a lot of names to keep track of. Not only do we have like the names of characters in the forms of the Valar and the Maiar, and stuff like that, and elves now, but we also have the names of different subgroups of elves.
Yeah.
And this is the first time I was like, okay, I'm having a hard time following this. I need a guide to this. So there is one in the book itself, towards the back, but I'm going to put that on the screen now. So we have the Quendi, which is the name for all of the elves that emerged at the beginning, the firstborn. That is just elves, Quendi, elves, all of them, right? So Orome goes back to Valinor, where the other, the kingdom of Aman, where the other Valar are, and announces the fact that the firstborn have arrived. This thing that they've been waiting for and preparing for. And so he's sent back there since he's developed some level of a connection with them and some level of trust. Now, some of them never trusted him, and others did. I think it was pointed out that the most courageous, the most noble of the Quendi were the ones that faced Orome and befriended him, and the others recoiled and were afraid. So he goes back and he says, you should come with me to our kingdom in Valinor and flee from this place, which is controlled by Melkor, right? And a lot of them were unsure of that. They didn't really know that they wanted to go with him, didn't trust. And so there were 3 lords. I'm going to actually put this one down for a second. Close this one. Open one other one real quick. There were 3 of their lords that they sent to Valinor to go and check it out and then come back and report. The first was named Ingwe. The second, Finwë, and the third was actually Elwë over here. I'll describe why his name is over here and not up here in a second. But these 3 were sent to there and they beheld the light of the 2 trees, right? And when they came back, that light exuded from them. And, everyone saw like this just blessed aura that was about them, right? And so some decided, okay, let's follow the Valar into the west and go there. And those who decided to travel with Orome into Aman were the Eldar. So you have the Quendi are all the elves, and there are 2 subdivisions at first. The Eldar are those who chose to go west. any of them who left that place where they originated, I think there was a lake specifically he talked about, was where they kind of started.
Because the stars would reflect off the lake, and
Yeah. So those who chose to leave the lake and go with Arme into the west are the Eldar. And those who did not go at all, never left, are the Avari, the unwilling. These are, I think you would call them the Dark Elves later on in like Middle Earth time, right? Actually, I don't even know if these come into the story of Lord of the Rings at all, the Avari. They were more in the east.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they'd have been further away.
And so, anyways, we don't really hear about these guys much, the Avari, after that time. Okay, and so then there are 3 subdivisions again of the Eldar, the ones who actually went into the west. And they are led by the 3 lords who first went into Valinor and came back and reported. Ingwe was the leader of the Vanyar. This was the largest group and the first. Actually, no, they weren't the largest. I think they were the smallest. The Teleri, I think, were the largest group. The Vanyar were the first, the most eager to go. And they followed Ingwe. And then they arrived first, and they never left Valinor. They've been there ever since then. They've been the most loyal to the Valar, always. The second group was the Knoll Door. And now that's an important name to remember, Knoll Door.
Yeah.
They are the chief characters when concerning elves that this story is about.
Mm-hmm.
They were led by Finwë, and they went second. And they were greatest friends of Aule. Now remember, the temperament of Aule is the most similar to Melkor. So the temperament of the Noldor is most similar to Aule, Melkor, and their skill was in the same things, the creation of jewels and metal work and all that kind of thing. They're smiths. Whereas the Vanyar were most closely aligned with Manwë and Varda. Manwë and Varda were the ones that they were closest to. The Teleri came last, and they really lingered quite a bit. They had the largest group, and they didn't go quickly.
Yeah.
They stopped a lot along the way, and there were groups that sundered from them and did not actually end up going all the way into Valinor. They stayed behind in Middle-earth still. So there are a bunch of groups there that we can talk about in a second, but the Teleri eventually get there, but even when they do, they stay on an island that like overlooks the Blessed Realm, and they like see it, but they didn't really like get all the way there at first.
Yeah.
So these among the Eldar were still the least willing to go. And Elwë, who led them, actually doesn't make it. Along the way, he gets lost in some woods because he's enchanted by a beautiful voice that he hears, and it's actually a Maiar. Shoot, her name is escaping me. Starts with an M. Hold on, let me open up the book and go to the part about of the Maiar. There they are. Melian. Melian is a Maya who was, I think she was of the people of Yavana. So she loved trees and plants and all that sort of stuff. So she would go to Middle Earth because she was concerned about the plant life over there. So she was over there, and Elwë wanders around and finds her, and essentially they fall in love, and he never freaking leaves. In fact, he's not even found by his people ever again. They kind of just are like, well, I guess he's not coming back. And so his brother, Olwe, ends up leading the Teleri across the sea. And Ulmo, the Lord of the Waters, is who they're most aligned with, right? And he sort of like created this island that he took across the ocean.
Yeah, like a boat. Like, he just kind of
yeah. But eventually, he and his Maiar, Ase is one of them that is talked about a lot in the book. But the Teleri learn shipbuilding from Ulmo, and they become like sailors and great mariners and that sort of thing. But there are others, the Nandor, the Sindar. The Sindar are a huge part of the elves that you find in Middle Earth. These are people who are led by Elwë, who saw the Blessed Realm, right? And so
Yeah.
they have a piece of that beauty in them, but that's why they're called gray elves. So the Avari are the dark, the Eldar are the light, I guess you could call them, especially the Vanyar are like the light elves,
Yeah.
and the Sindar are kind of like the gray elves who have a piece of both in them. And then they stayed behind in Middle Earth and became probably the most powerful or influential of the elves that remained in Middle Earth and never went to Valinor. Um, and they never actually made it to the sea. But there are some that got all the way at least to the coast of Middle Earth, but still did not go all the way across to Valinor. And this is where Círdan the shipwright comes in, and he's mentioned in the Lord of the Rings a lot. So he was of the people of the Teleri that made it all the way to the coast, but were like, you know what? Actually, Ulmo convinced them to stay. So that is actually something important to bring up, I think, is that Ulmo is not always like in line with the other Valar. He doesn't like I said, he doesn't usually go there unless there's like a really important summons, like something that they're really debating that's really important. But he fought from the beginning to say, no, don't bring the elves to Valinor. Let them stay in Middle Earth, and let's get back involved over there. And they were like, no, we want to bring them over here. So he convinced some of them to stay behind, and that's where Círdan the shipwright, who is mentioned, who builds the ships that take the elves at the end of Lord of the Rings into Valinor at the end, like that's where he comes in. So those are the different subdivisions of the elves, that some that stay behind and some that go over to Middle Earth. And the Knoll Door are the most important. So Finwë is the king of the Knoll Door, the lord who had gone into the Blessed Realm, seen the trees, and come back and led his people, the Knoll Door. Finwë is their king. And he has a son named Fëanor, who is a huge, important character in this story. And again, just reiterating, these are the people most closely in temperament and in mind and in skill to Aule Melkor. That's kind of, there are very proud people. People are very good with building and creating things with their hands. And so for a long, long time, actually, I totally skipped the fact that they had a freaking war.
Oh, yeah, because Melkor was taking all the elves and he was like picking them off, and finally the Valor were like, we have to go in and stop him so that the elves can leave safely.
Yeah, so that's another reason why a lot of the elves did not necessarily trust the Valar, because there was a war that literally changed the face of the land.
Yeah, it was huge.
It was like fire burning and earthquakes and all this stuff happening to the north of where they were, and they were just like, what on earth?
Yeah.
Who are these people? You know, like, this is crazy. So anyways, they captured Melkor, though, in that war, and they brought him back, and they enslaved him in the halls of Mandos where no one can escape, not even a Vala like Melkor. But they did not delve through all of the depths of Autumno, his stronghold, and they did not capture Sauron. So Sauron was allowed to linger behind, as well as some of the other Balrogs and servants. So they're still there. But Melkor is not enslaved, but imprisoned. And I think it's for 3 ages. They basically are just going to keep him in solitary confinement. He has no one to talk to. He just sits there by himself for 3 ages. And then they will kind of hear his case again at that point. And that's when they summon the Eldar to come into the West, and everyone gets settled. And eventually the Teleri, even the ones that stopped on the island, didn't go all the way. Eventually some of them do come, and they live on the coasts of
they live on the shore.
Aman. So anyways, at this point, it's really only important to know that Fëanor was the son of Finwë, and his spirit was so fiery and so strong-willed that even in just the act of giving birth to him, in the fact that she had to grow this powerful spirit in her belly, that she could not bear to live anymore. She was like, all of my strength went into
this
giving birth to this incredibly powerful spirit, and I just can't bear it anymore. Like, the trauma and the hurt of that, I can't be healed from. And Finwë's like, no, just go into the fields of Nienna and you can find peace there, and they can heal you. And she eventually just dies. She just can't take it. Like,
Yeah.
Fëanor was such a powerful spirit that she could not bear having been his mother.
That's
And
crazy.
so she dies, and Finwë is in a lot of mourning, and Fëanor, I can only imagine, what you would feel if like your spirit was too fiery and too hot for your mother to even like bear, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Finwë gives all of his love to his son, sort of focuses on him, and it has total loyalty. But he ends up remarrying and having two other sons with another woman. This is Fingolfin and Finarfin. Okay.
Yeah.
These sons of Finwë are very important characters, so you need to commit their names.
Fingolfin is my favorite character.
Fingolfin
in this whole book.
The biggest beast of any elf who has ever lived. And there's
absolutely
two examples of this. One that we did not get to in this week's reading, but one that we did. Fingolfin is awesome. Yeah. He is so cool. Like one of the best characters in the whole book. So remember Fingolfin, the first of the half-brothers to Fëanor.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and Fëanor is also very important, right? So Fëanor is, again, probably the most skilled of all of the Knoll Door. The strongest spirit, the most skilled, has the greatest potential, the most fair. He's like top-notch, tippy-top shelf, one of the most amazing elves of all the Knoll Door. And what have we seen commonly through this? When someone has that much skill,
when they're just
that much potential, and they begin to think that they deserve ownership, rule, domination of others, their pride begins to blind them, right? And this is true in real life, like I said. Like, look at the most arrogant. Well, some people can be arrogant without having any skill to back it up. But you look at like the greatest athletes on the planet, like Michael Jordan or LeBron James, and you see that there is a certain level of, some would say, deserved conceit or arrogance, right? They can walk the walk. But these dudes do not back down to anyone. They hold themselves high up. They do not have a lot of humility.
Right.
And part of that is what drives them to greatness in the first place. They are so driven to be the best, to excel, to show how great they are, that they put forth the effort to make that happen. And so Fëanor is that type of person. And again, it's a slow burn, but he accomplishes something, I wouldn't say equal to what Yavana did in the creation of the trees, but among all of the works of the children of Iluvatar, of the elves, he created probably the most beautiful creation of all of them. And that was the creation of the Silmarils.
And the Silmarils, even the Valar, were like, they wanted them. They were like, these are cool. We always want to look at these and be able to admire their beauty and hold them and all that kind of stuff.
Because what's so great about the Silmarils, and that's what's on the cover of this version of the book I have, it's Fëanor holding the three Silmarils. What makes them so great is he created these jewels that could not be marred or broken by violence, not dissimilar to the One Ring, right? They can't just like destroy the ring in any other way except to throw it in the fires of Mordor, right? So he creates jewels like that can't be destroyed or opened by anyone else except him. And he took some of the light of the trees and preserved them inside of these jewels. And so the light of Aman was forever preserved in these, right? And in a way, there was a foresight in Fëanor's work that was profound even to the Valor, because no one assumed that the light of the trees would ever be destroyed. But even if he didn't really know what he was doing, he had preserved literally the most beautiful creation of the entire history of this world inside of those Silmarils. And their brilliance and their beauty, again, this light of Aman, when you look upon it, it becomes part of you. And people can see that blessedness in you, right? So he preserved that light and that power inside of these jewels. And it was at this point that Melkor's case was heard again. And I love the way that it describes Manwë, his inability to see the deceit of Melkor, because there was no evil in him, it says, right? there was no evil
Yeah.
in Manwë, so he could not comprehend evil, and so he couldn't see through the deceit of Melkor, because Melkor was pretending, oh, I repent, and like I want to help now, and I've realized the error of my ways, and Manwë, being his brother, is eager to accept him. And some of the others, not Tolkas, was he didn't say anything. He didn't come right out and like defy Manwë or anything like that, but he was like, I don't know about this. and Mandos as well, like held his tongue, but like obviously knew like what was really going on there with him. So anyways, he comes out and he immediately begins this slow work of spreading the seeds of dissension and doubt and revenge and all of these things into the hearts of the people. But the Knoll Door are really the only ones who heed his work. The Vanyar don't really have anything to do with him. The Teleri never accept him. The Teleri never do. But the Knoll Door, who are most like him in mind and skill, they start to kind of accept some of what he's saying, some of the sentiments. And it's really interesting, and I think really quite brilliant, the way that Tolkien works, how these lies worked. To me, it felt very believable, because the Valar had never said anything to the elves about the Secondborn. They never mentioned the fact that there were going to be others that came after them. And so Melkor is the first Vala to tell them there are going to be others that come after you. And you see the reason why the Valar have called you here to their kingdom is so that they can give the dominion of Middle Earth to the men that come after, and they'll be able to more easily control them. They couldn't control you, and they knew that. So they swayed you here with all the promise of this bliss and blessedness to stay here while they took over Middle Earth, and now they'll be able to more easily control those people, right? So they're like, like it's just that little seed of doubt and half truths, all of it half truths. There are, of course, going to be a Secondborn, but the fact that that was hidden from them, or at least was never talked about, creates a seed of doubt. Like, well, wait, why wouldn't the Valar have told us about this? Maybe they are keeping this a secret, right? And he starts to kind of sow these seeds of doubt. And he especially focuses on the House of Finwë. So Fëanor, his first son, and Fingolfin and Finarfin, Fëanor's half-brothers. And he tells Fëanor, these two, they want to rise up and take the leadership of the house, and he's like, Fëanor has no love of Melkor. He never freaking likes him at all. He never follows him. He's too strong-willed to submit to anyone. So even to Melkor, he would not submit. But those seeds of doubt were at least in his mind. And he does the same thing with Fingolfin and Finarfin, spreading these lies about Fëanor. And, a lot of it's true. Fëanor is too hot. He's too conceited. He's too arrogant, and that will lead to trouble. And so they're in basically a council with their father, Finwë. And Fingolfin is saying, why can't you tame Fëanor? Like, he's too crazy. Like, you've got to, take a stand here. He's your son. Like, you are the king, right? Like, you've got to cool this guy off. Because Fëanor was already thinking about leaving Valinor and going back to Middle Earth and being free. See, that was the one thing that did take hold of Melkor's lies, was that they were thralls of the Valar, that they were not free, and that he, of course, being who he was, would desire freedom and to do his own thing and create his own works and have no one looking over him, and he could, live life as he saw fit, as he wanted to lead. Again, all of this is in the same temperament that Melkor had in the beginning. So, he goes into the council chamber, sees Fingolfin talking badly about him, and is in full armaments and pulls a sword on him. And essentially threatens him there. And so he's banished for many years by the Valar after that. Finwë follows him and says, I consider myself unkinged as long as my son is banished from coming to Telerion or to the house of
Tyrion.
Tyrion,
yeah.
We're essentially the city of Manwë. And it was at that point that Melkor put his final act or final ploy into effect. And he goes to Fëanor and says, see, didn't I tell you how unjust the Valar are, and they've banished you and all this stuff. And he's like, and he overreaches a little bit, and he says, the Silmarils will never be safe as long as you are here. And he sees through that at last. And he's like, and I love what he writes there. In fact, I've got to actually pull it up, because this is part of what I love about the book. A lot of people, who talk about how hard it is to get into, I think there's two parts of that. One, this is a lot of lore. I mean, like a lot of names, a lot of things to remember. Two, it's written like scripture, right? It's not written like a novel, like normal prose.
Yeah.
And thirdly, a lot of the language is sort of, I mean, it kind of borders between being early modern English, which is like King James and Shakespearean, which is like all the dialogue is written like that. But then I think like the rest of it is more Victorian age kind of, but it still kind of borders between those two ages. So the language is very archaic in a sense, and it's elevated and a bit exalted, and I think that throws a lot of people off. But I adore the language of the book, and I'll explain why in a second, but I loved this in particular. And he cursed Melkor and bade him be gone, saying, get thee gone from my gate, thou jail crow of Mandos. And he shut the doors of his house in the face of the mightiest of all the dwellers in Ea.
Nice.
That language is has so much more impact to me than if he had written that in a more modern form of English.
Sure.
Now, I will...
It does also underscore a little bit the pride of Fëanor.
Yes.
That he's willing to do this. Like, he is the kind of person who will slam the door in the face of the most powerful being you ever encountered in forever. And it's Fëanor, dude. He's like, screw it, I don't care. You're not better than me.
Yes. I think I need to admit, at least partially, that I think part of my enjoyment and reverence for this type of language comes from the fact that I grew up reading scripture.
Sure, and it's not as difficult for us to
understand.
Yeah. For a lot of people, I think it is. Yeah.
If you didn't grow up reading this mode of speech and this type of language, it can be offsetting, and I understand that. I can understand.
And specifically this type of language, because Mike and I attended the same church growing up, and the Bible we used was the King James version of the Bible. Yeah, right. And a lot of churches, especially modern churches, have a modern version. It doesn't read the way that the Silmarillion does, but the King James version does.
Yeah. And so there was, I think, an innate sense of reverence and maybe like awe is the right word to describe, associated with language like this, because I held it for so long in this regard of it being...
no one talks like that anymore.
Well, and like the word biblical, when you think of something being of biblical proportions,
it's epic.
There's an epicness of like that is innate in the language of the Bible, right? And there's something so ancient and archaic about it that creates this sense of awe and mystery. And so when I read language like this, to me, it has like greater impact just because it is written in this language. And so the fact that these legends in this book are, and that was one thing I noticed too. So we have the first book of the Silmarillion is the Ainulindale.
Yeah.
And then the second book is Valakenta, right? And one thing that, for anyone who's read the Bible before knows, is that the Bible wasn't written with all these volumes compiled from the start. Right. Each of these were separate books in and of themselves that were written by different authors. So, like in the New Testament, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John all essentially account the same set of events, but from a different perspective. And so they kind of cover a lot of the same detail. They go over and repeat a lot of the things we already saw in the other book, but they were not at the beginning planning here. Let me take your book and I'll put your book on the back of mine.
Right, yeah.
Like they were all separate
Like,
books.
which one? Does mine come first or second? Okay, you cover that, I'll do this. Yeah.
It wasn't until the Catholic Church that they compiled all of these books together into a single volume.
It was like 300 years later.
Which is what Bible comes from, bibliotheca, like a library, right?
Yeah.
Essentially, a collection of books. That's what the Bible is. And so I found it so, I mean, even this kind of detail to me, the fact that the Iulindale and the Valaquenta cover some of the same information is so real, feels so like grounded in the sense that that's how the Bible feels to read. That's how Scripture feels to read, because you have two different people accounting the same set of events in different ways, a little bit, with a little different perspective. And so
that is cool.
My background in studying Scriptures, I think, led to this feeling so, having just a sense of reverence, not just from how freaking awesome and well thought through the content of it is, but also in the delivery, in the way it is written. The fact that it is not a normal novel's prose, but is written like a chronicle, like a tome from ancient
chronicle,
times.
That's a good word. Yeah.
To read this book feels like you are reading something that someone wrote thousands of years ago. Not like something written by a man who lived in the 1930s and 40s and 50s and 60s.
Right.
And that, to me, is what makes it so... That's what makes it work. It's what makes this work as feeling legendary and epic and large in scale. And like there's just this mysterious mythos. Like all of it works because of the structure of the book, not just because of the content of what happens there. And it is the reason why this, of all of Tolkien's works, I think for me works the most, is because it both of those things, the style of the writing and the content of the writing, are perfectly matched together, and they supplement each other in such a way to where it feels like I'm reading something written by someone in like 5000 BC.
Yeah.
But of course, converted or translated into English by King James.
Yeah, it's like something old that was translated, King James era. But even then, this was, it may be millions of years old, but it was translated hundreds of years ago, even older still. Like not than it was originally written, but older than modern times, right? It's still removed from where we are now. It's really cool.
And that is, to me, why, I mean, that is the whole reason it works, like I said. And so, as Rob brings up here, the Bible is not the most accessible of reads unless you are possessed of a certain fervor. The Silmarillion is the same. And that I can give you that. And it was so interesting that when I was reading the Silmarillion for the first time, I was driven to look at the aids in the back, to look up the names, to look up the lineages, to look up the map, and get it all straight in my head. And I wasn't going, oh, I don't get this. Throw that to the side.
Right.
You know what I mean? And a lot of people, they don't want to bother to work at it to figure it all out, because it is a lot of stuff.
Right.
But the language of the book, to me, is so awesome that I was just driven to like consume it in full and really get it all straight in my head. And it's why it's my favorite. Okay. So he slams the door in the face of Melkor. And Melkor then essentially goes and finds Ungoliant. So he tries to escape, and he leads him on a wild goose chase. So he goes to the north. And Orome and Tolkas follow. And they're like, go get him, don't let him leave. And then he unclads himself. Because they talk about how, like, the Valor they're not people in the sense that, like, they have bodies that can be slain. They take those forms when they interact with people. But really, that's not who they are. They don't really have a male or female.
Yeah, they're like a
anything
spirit.
Like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, he unclads himself, right? He turns into his spirit form and then just sort of drifts into the south. And they all go after him in the north. And he finds Ungoliant. And Ungoliant is, man, like, mysterious as crap. Like, does not explain the origins of this spirit. Obvious. I mean, I won't say she's a Maiar. We don't know what she is, but she's a powerful spirit.
Swan Knight 14 mentioned earlier that Ungoliant may have been present from the void before Earth was created, technically.
Yeah.
Yeah, Swan Knight's kind of bringing it up here.
Ungoliant wasn't created by Iluvatar. Interesting.
Yeah, it came from the void of nothing, which I don't know. I don't remember reading that, but
that's really cool. Yeah. Because one of the things I loved in the description was that she created... So the whole reason that this worked, where he went in and she destroyed the light in the trees and cast darkness over Valinor, was because, well, he gave her some kind of power. So he issued something, like gave her a gift, and then she used that to cast this utter darkness, a cloud of darkness around them, so that they couldn't really be seen. And so at a time of festival, again, right? And this was a time of festival where Fëanor was supposed to be reconciled with his brothers again. Right. So he came there. Finwë would not come until he was no longer banished. But Fëanor goes, and Fingolfin says, I release you. This is why Fingolfin's such a beast. Not only is he like super amazing and skilled and a powerful warrior and everything later on, but he's just got this good heart to him as well. He's like, of course I release you. And yes, you are the elder, and I respect you, and I will follow you. He doesn't really know how much trouble he's going to get himself in by claiming that I will follow you anywhere you go.
Right. And he's a man of his word. So if he says that he's going to do it, he's going to do it. And that it's a point of, like value for him. Yeah. It's a good thing for him, but it was maybe not the wisest to pledge himself like that.
So Ungoliant is, I forgot to mention, like a spider. Essentially the predecessor to Shelob and Shelob's ilk.
But Ungoliant was like 100 times bigger than Shelob.
Way huger. Everything in this book is like 100,000 times larger than anything you saw in the Hobbit.
Exactly. It's on a whole different scale.
If there's a dragon in the Silmarillion, you can safely bet it is like 3,000 times larger than Smaug. And that if there's a spider, it's way bigger and more powerful than Shelob. So all these things you see in Lord of the Rings, they're way bigger in scale in the Silmarillion. But so Ungoliant goes, okay, so he makes a light-hearted oath to her that he would feed her whatever she wanted, because she's entirely driven by this lust to consume. She's constantly famished, like in a perpetual state of hunger, and nothing can satiate it, right? So he says, I will let you devour all the light from the trees, because it's not just the two trees, but like all the trees kind of like are part of the same network of light, I guess, that is born inside the two. So like all the trees in this kingdom kind of glow with a light. And so she came down, and he says, I will give to you with both hands. So he's saying, I'll hold nothing back. Give you whatever you want if you help me throw down Valinor and cast it into darkness and steal the jewels of... he didn't say specifically which jewels, but steal the jewels of Fëanor's house, which is separate from Tirion, right? He's living in outcast place, right? So they go down. She's sucking all this light, just devouring, eating, destroying. And they're all in Tirion at a time of festival, having a good time, brothers being reconciled. And then it's like, holy crap, what is that? Because he describes the darkness of Ungoliant as being living or sentient in its own right. It's not just a darkness that's born from a lack of light, but it is born from the light that she's consuming and perverting and poisoning. And it is a darkness that can actually pierce the eye and it like actually has a substance to it. It's not a lack, a darkness born of lack, but a darkness born of perverting and destroying light. So this is the darkness that's cast over them as they go through, devours all the light from the trees. Melkor goes to the house of Fëanor, does not find him there, but slays Finwë.
Finwë's there, yeah.
Takes tons of his jewels, like steals basically his like treasures of his house and the Silmarils, and takes them and flees across basically like a, what do they call it? Like an ice bridge, like the one that used to connect.
Oh, like a strait, like the Bering Strait kind of thing.
Well, one that like it connected Russia with Alaska originally.
Yeah, I think they called it the Bering Strait. An ice bridge.
Anyways, in the far north, there was a bridge of ice that connected Valinor to Middle Earth, essentially. And they cross across that. And he steals all of his jewels and kills his father. And so when Yavana, remember, the one who created the trees, finds that all their light's been taken and that the branches are all withered and dead. I mean, this was again a work that she could never replicate, could never replicate again. It's like I poured every ounce of. Again, we drew the comparison earlier. If I was creating a video and then someone came and just like erased my entire freaking project and to start over again, it's not going to be the same the second time. You can't. There are some things you can't replicate twice. And so she asks Fëanor, "Can you please give me the Silmarils and unlock the light? Because I could heal the trees if I had some of the light to restore back into them." And he is, again, super proud. And he's like, "But these things I created, I can never make their likeness again. Like, this is my magnum opus creation." You know what I mean? Like, you don't know what you're asking of me. And Tulkas is like, "That light is not yours. Like, that was given to you. The entire freaking like beauty of those jewels comes from Yavana's light. Like, what's your problem?" And so there's like certain Valar that are all on his back about it. But Aule defends him and says like, "No, hold on. Like, you don't understand what you're asking. As a smith, I can understand like just how much work and love went into the creation of those jewels that houses the light. So give him time to think about this." And so there's division even amongst the Valar about what should be done. And then Fëanor gets word about what happened and the fact that his father's been slain and the jewels have been stolen. And at that point, he just completely freaking breaks. And his need for vengeance overcomes everything else. And he starts to believe some of the lies that Melkor planted, that the Valar want to enslave and enthrall the elves, that they're not going to leave the kingdom of Middle Earth to the second-born that come later. You know, like, we're going to seek for our freedom. And a lot of what he's saying is sort of like, there's not necessarily evil intent in it. It's just a huge amount of stubborn pride. To seek for freedom is not bad. To want to live your life your own way and not feel like that your lives are being tampered by a being above you, you know, those are not necessarily bad things to want. It's just, to what lengths are you willing to go to ensure that that happens? Who are you willing to harm? And what is really the purpose behind it all? Do you want to rule others, or are you really seeking for freedom for the people that follow you? And this is where things start to get mixed up and become more nuanced with Fëanor, because what he really wants is his vengeance on Melkor. Right. He says, "Melkor is of the same kindred as the Valar, and I will not bear the sight of any kindred who would slay my father and steal my treasures."
Right.
So that's all sort of worked in him over time, and his pride overcomes. So he takes the Knoll Door, essentially, all of the elves of his father's house, because now he's the king of the Knoll Door with his father having been slain, right, and rouses them. Speech is another part of what they really excel at, the Knoll Door, their speechcraft and their smith work and that sort of thing. That's like what they're really good at. So he just rouses them all to anger, and they say, "We're going back into the east, and we're going to go get the Silmarils back." And he and his sons all take an oath, and they swear it in the name of Ilúvatar himself. So they are totally bound by this oath. They cannot. And, you know, that's actually something that's a bit biblical in origin as well. Like the idea of oaths in scripture. There's a binding supernatural power to the oaths that are sworn in the Bible, right?
You know, this is a common theme in a lot of mythologies, and not just the Bible. This is something I think Tolkien understood really well, and something. This is one of the things that stood out to me this reading that I've never really noticed before, is the idea of swearing an oath, and like what it means and why it's so binding, and at least historically speaking through mythologies, why it has been, or at least has seemed to be so binding. Mm-hmm. And there's an important element within the swearing of an oath, that the swearing of an oath doesn't always mean that much until it's like sealed with blood, basically.
Yes.
And I think the idea behind that is that when you say something or when you make a promise, it isn't necessarily that you like it's not a given that you are going to follow through with that promise. But if you make a promise to the extent that you are willing to shed blood, either yours or someone else's, it like lends this power to the promise that you will do it and nothing will get in the way. And so with this story, with what happens next with the Teleri elves, with the kinslaying, right?
Mm-hmm.
That was essentially Finwë and all the Knoll Door making their oath. They swore their oath. And in terms of Tolkien, he's like, it was sworn under the name of Luvatar, and that's why it's so binding. But I think that, and there's a very good reason why the very next step after swearing this oath is the shedding of blood, is going to that length, that your own people and other people are being slain, and that seals the oath and makes it, that's where the actual power comes from.
Yes.
I think there's something there.
The blood is an essential part a lot of times.
And that's why people always, like in movies, they cut their hands and they swear.
Yeah.
But it's like the shedding of blood it's more than that. And so many mythologies have that. So many stories and religions and practices have not just the oath or the promise, but it's almost always sealed with blood.
There's power in the blood, right?
There is. Yeah.
This is actually something we talked about back when we read The Last Wish, right? Like there was a magic, a power in blood. And in love, right? That was sort of like beyond what people could even comprehend. So, anyways, this is actually very common. Colin Pelusa says covenants. Yes, covenants are like the most powerful form of oath swearing, right? And you were bound by that covenant when you made it. So Fëanor and his sons swear an oath that they will not rest until they get the Silmarils back, and that basically anything that gets in the way, they are going destroy.
There's nothing.
So that oath is sworn. Now, I want to talk a little bit here about Galadriel, because this is where Galadriel is mentioned and where she first comes into the story. And to me,
real quick before you do this, I have to go. It's 8:00.
Go for it.
And I've got to go now. But we're getting close to the point where we stop reading.
Yeah, we're almost at the end.
Okay, but are you cool with taking it from here then?
Yep, I'm good.
Okay, cool. All right, guys. Peace. Thanks for watching. And
see you later.
I'll see you next time.
Have a good one. So, we get the mention of Galadriel for the first time. Okay. Galadriel, the only woman of the Knoll Door to stand that day, tall and valiant among the contending princes, was eager to be gone. No oaths she swore, but the words of Fëanor concerning Middle-earth had kindled in her heart, for she yearned to see the wide unguarded lands and to rule there, a realm of her own will. This, to me, is really telling and really does a good job of setting up the Galadriel we meet in Lord of the Rings. Because again, she's of this people of the Knoll Door, of their temperament, this need to not just be free, but also to rule, right? It mentions us right there. For she yearned to see the wide unguarded lands and to rule there a realm of her own will. Now, think about how that relates to what happens when the Ring of Power is brought to her by Frodo. And the yearning in her heart for how she could control or dominate, govern, if she were to possess that ring. And the fact that that was really a strong temptation for her. But that at that point she overcame it, she turned away and decided, I'm going back into the West. Now, we're getting the introduction to this character. She is the granddaughter of Finwë. So she was born in Valinor. She was born in Aman. But so she was there in the Blessed Realm. She had, the light of Aman in her. But she was part of the people of the Knoll Door and had very much in her that burning, fiery spirit, that stubborn spirit, that arrogant spirit that was tamed through all the strife and hardship that the Knoll Door suffer by what comes next. Because they go to the coasts and they don't know how to build ships. That's not their thing. But Olwe, the Lord of the Teleri, meets with Feanor and essentially refuses him and says, "No, I'm not going to go against the will of the Valar, and you're acting too rashly, and I will not help you." And Feanor tries to say, "Oh, look at all of the halls and the beautiful things that you have that we gave to you, and now you'll deny me of this." And his response to that is, of course we're not forsaking any kind of friendship, but it is the part of a friend to point out the folly. And what you're doing is not good. Like, this is not a good thing. And also, the ships that we have were made by our own hands. The ships mean to us it's not dissimilar to what the Silmarils mean to you. And these we could never build again. Like, all the craftsmanship that went into building these ships, we'll not give them to you. And so Feanor and his sons, having sworn that oath, they're bound to do whatever it takes. And so we have the kinslaying, where the Knoll Door came and slew the Teleri and stole the ships and set out. And very, very dark sort of like chapter in the history of the Knoll Door. And eventually Mandos meets up with them and says, like, to Feanor and his sons and those who swore the oath, you are banished. Like, you are gonna learn through hardship and through a lot of trauma, like you'll be punished for what you have done. But for anyone else that will repent and come back now, we will, we'll accept you back. For those who were not leading that charge to slay the Teleris, because a lot of it mentions that a lot of the Noldor sort of like became aware that there was a fight going on, but didn't know the reason why. And so they were just there's fighting, there's war breaking out. We got to go in and like help our people. But they didn't understand that it was Feanor and his sons who started that conflict. So some of them were not entirely to blame for what happened. And so Feanor, of course, is not going to ever be able to return, nor his sons who swore the oath. But Fingolfin, the guy we've been talking about, the biggest beast of all the elves, he stays loyal to Feanor and will follow him. And Finarfin, the other half-brother, he repents. He goes back, and some people go back with him, but a lot of the Noldor still decide to go. Now, there aren't enough ships to carry all of them across, and so they had two choices. You either go in a ship, or you have to go over that ice bridge we were talking about earlier. Which is, like, frigid, horrible conditions, like, almost impossible to survive crossing that. Like, Melkor could do it, but Avala, but not the elves. At least, it would seem. And Feanor decides to take the ships in secret and take only those who he trusted the most across to the other side. And when they get there, Maethros, his oldest son, who is, of all of the sons of Feanor, probably the one who is the closest to being good, and is not like a total douchebag like the rest of them. But Maethros says, okay, let's send the ships back and get the others, bring them here. And Feanor, in his pride, is like, I count no loss for those that we left behind, and burn the ships and leave them to either go back to Valinor and suffer the humiliation and the shame, or to have to cross over the ice bridge. So yes, Olwe is the king of the Teleri in Aman. Elwë was left behind in Middle Earth. And we'll be learning more about him, but this is something to keep in mind for next time. So Olwe, the king of the Teleri who were slain, is the brother of Elwë, who was originally leading the Teleri, but got distracted in the forest and married Melian, right? The Maya. So they are brothers. And Elwë stayed behind in Middle Earth, and that's the title of the next chapter is of the Sindar. So the Sindar elves are essentially his people, Elwë's people, who stayed behind. Chapter 10 of the Sindar. Those are Elwë's people, Elwë and Melian, who are the king and queen of that people in Middle Earth who never actually went. So imagine what he's going to feel when he learns that these Noldorian elves, these Eldar who are coming back, what they did in order to, get the ships and return. They slew his brother and his brother's people. So imagine the strife, that will come there, right? That the elves of Middle Earth will not be united, and how that will harm their attempts to try and, slay the hordes of Morgoth, of Melkor. Sorry, I forgot to mention that when Feanor learned about what Melkor did, he named him Morgoth. So they no longer call Melkor by his original name anymore. They call him Morgoth, which is the new name given to him because of what he did to his father for stealing the Silmarils. So that's all kind of been set up now. And this is, I guess what you could say is that the story of the Silmarillion really begins. I wouldn't put it that way, but you could say it begins in chapter 7, which is where it talks about, of the Silmarils and the unrest of the Knoll Door, because the entire story for the remainder of the book is going to be about this pursuit of the sons of Feanor to get the Silmarils back at any cost, and the wars between Morgoth and the Noldorian elves who returned to Middle Earth. So that's but you need all that context before chapter 7 to really understand the meaning of it. You need to know who the Valar are. You need to know who Morgoth is, Melkor is. You need to know who these elves are and their relationships with each other. So everything that we've read is incredibly important context to the story. None of it is superfluous. None of it is unnecessary. None of it can be thrown away. All of it needs to be understood, really, to fully comprehend where we're going here with the story and why it's important and everything else. So anyways, as Swan Knight is written here, Elwë is Thingol. That's the other tough thing about the book, is that a lot of characters have more than one name in different languages. But we'll get to that later. But we're going to learn of the Sindarian elves next. Those who stayed behind in Middle Earth, who were originally going to go west, but stayed behind with Elwë, who is King Thingol. That's the name you will know him by for the rest of the book. Whew. I think that we've gotten through everything that I wanted to cover now. Lots and lots of stuff, but I can't stress anymore how much I love the language of the book and the structure. The way that it's written and the power that comes from it being written in that style. One thing I did forget to go over real quick was Ungoliant and Morgoth, right? So she demanded more, to consume more, and he gave her all of the jewels that he took from the keep of Feanor, except the Silmarils. He refused to give that to her. So she's grown so large and so powerful from all this stuff that she's consumed, all this light, and he had been diminished from the power he had given her, that for a minute he was afraid, and he calls out to his servants and his Balrogs, and they all come out to his aid, and they essentially fight off Ungoliant. She runs and hides and breeds with other spiders in Gorgoroth, but then, eventually the legend goes that she was so famished, so desperate to consume and everything, that she consumed herself in the end. It came to her end. So anyways, I love this story. I hope you guys are seeing some of the reasons why it has been so inspirational for me. If you have anything else that you want to add to the discussion of stuff that we covered today, feel free to do that. If you have any questions concerning who characters are, or what the names are, if you're having a hard time keeping it straight, feel free to ask me about that. We can continue that discussion in the Discord as well. I'll be active there if you guys want to @me in there and say, hey, what about this? What about that? I'll be happy to continue the discussion there. Anyways, anything else anyone wants to add? Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and stop now. So I'll give it just a couple seconds, see if anyone responds. Elder Crawl says that was interesting AF. I hope I can watch the next one live too. Yeah, that'd be great if you could join us every Tuesday night. Same time. But we'll also upload these videos to the archive channel too. So if you do miss one live, you can always watch it on YouTube a few days later. All right, everybody. So it looks like everyone's good to go. So have a great rest of your week. Thanks for joining, and hope to see you again next time. Peace out. Oh, when will it go onto YouTube? I'm not going to put it up tomorrow, but probably Thursday or Friday this week, since we didn't do the podcast, so I don't have to worry about compiling that all tonight. I'll be able to get it ready for upload on either Thursday or Friday. That's when it'll go up. Okay, everybody. Have a good one. Peace out.